Good morning to everyone that's joined the webinar today. Thank you so much for coming along to watch this. I'm Andy Perrins. I'm the Category Manager at YPO for Public Sector and Emergency Services and Social Care. We've worked closely with ARPAS in developing a solution that we have available for procurement in the public sector. But I thought it would be really helpful for you all to listen to some really informative information from ARPAS, who are a very strong representation of the drone market and the supplier market. So I hope you find it interesting. You can tap questions into the Q&A box at the bottom. We will aim to answer those towards the end. So I'll just hand over to Graham now from ARPAS. Graham.
Thank you. Just quickly, I should mention we are recording the session, so if anyone's got a problem with that, put it in the chat. Then you can put questions in the chat or in the Q&A. We'll sort of monitor both. So Andy's just introduced ARPAS. If I just talk, I mean, we're effectively a trade organization. We're a not-for-profit. We represent the drone ecosystem, so that's drone operators and any professional, drone manufacturers, the whole gamut of solutions there. And one of our aims is the biggest aim is line 3, to accelerate the safe adoption of drones in multiple industries. And clearly, public sector is a massive part of organizations that could use drones. And really, I'm just going to give you a very quick overview today on why we are so excited and try to get you excited about where you could and should be using drones. We're also going to cover a brief introduction to drones. There was a recent government announcement last week on the Future of Flight Action Plan published by the DFT and industry jointly. And I've got a few slides on that, and we can give you a link to that if you're interested in reading it. Really just looking at some projects and some business cases about the benefits that organizations have achieved using drones. And we've just picked a selection of them that we think are relevant to public bodies. The people who are going to be talking is myself, Graham Brown. I'm the chair at ARPAS. And it's got on there that I also sit on the National Police Chiefs Council advisory group on drones as well. And then I'll be pleased to introduce David Holmes, who is the co-founder at InView Assets. They're a drone operator. We're hoping we keep David. You can see him on the screen there, but he's actually on site at Bristol Airport working on a job surveying the airport there. So all things being well, he'll talk about some of the good examples at the end of the session. So before we start, my questions normally are, does anyone use drone? Is anyone thinking of using drones? Does everybody understand that drones are actually a very regulated activity, regulated by the Civil Aviation Authority? Quite often a thing that comes up with councils in particular is, who do you think owns the airspace? And the answer to that typically is no one. It's a state asset. However, what you do control is you control takeoff and landing points. The next point there, different aviation language, is really to say that these things aren't simple. And as in all industries, aviation has a particular language that is quite confusing. And that's one of the things that ARPAS does, is we try to help sort of put some of that into regular English and translate it so it links with health and safety. And the other point that comes up quite often is it's specialist insurance required to fly drones. Your normal regular broker will not be able to cover that, or at least not cover it cost effectively. And the last point is really do you realize by using drones, you can make significant financial savings, improve safety for workers, and improve the carbon footprint? So, and just on that health and safety piece, I was reading earlier this week the update on the health and safety falls from height and accidents and what have you. Now, it is disappointing to see that fatal accidents went up by 30% between 2021-22 and 2022-23. So we are still putting people in danger. That was the non-fatal injuries from falls from height were 44,800 in that period, 123 every day. And there are 6 million working days lost to non-fatal workplace injuries. So it's a significant impact. And the advice is the only way to avoid falls from height is don't go up there. And one of the things is, you know, where you can use a drone for confined spaces, dangerous places, and working at height. So what are drones used for? They're used really as a professional tool to capture images and data safely, removing people from the unsafe places. And really that's sort of the key message: avoiding dull, dangerous, dirty, safer, smarter, cheaper way of doing things. The quality of the data now is second to none. Can you just go back a second? And so that sort of CO2 reduction journey is also part of the equation. Now, that's really, I'm focusing on small drones, and I'm going to explain sort of small and big in a second, but yeah, next slide, thanks. There is this other piece that you'll see in the action plan, which is about eVTOL or air taxis or air mobility, regional air mobility, urban air mobility. That's slightly further away, but from a council perspective, you will see the activity ramping up on some of that, because clearly it needs fairly, you know, some of the planning and organizational timelines are quite long. It's a little bit equivalent to having charging points for electric cars. You know, you got to start because it take a while to get stuff in place. But the scale of small drones, yeah, next slide, please. In terms of the CAA, the Civil Aviation Authority, 513,860 drones registered in the UK. The contribution to the economy, you know, the PwC report said 45 billion by 2030. You know, you can take that. We don't really know. The point is, it will be big, and they will have an impact across a lot of different areas, which I'm hoping to go and explain. Yeah, next one. That shows you a graph. This actually isn't our slide. It came from some people who've been doing research, but the bottom line is interesting. You know, the solutions will deliver significant value, benefit, capability to organizations, and it is set, the top right, set to grow in scope and scale. And most of these predictions do not include the addition of things like small robotic arms that can go into places you don't want people to go, and provide, you know, they can actually do a job of work. And you know, that's not factored in yet, because it's sort of tomorrow's world type of activity. Very quickly, large drones, cargo, passenger carrying, emergency services, search and rescue, those things, we're not focused on that today. As I said, that's, you know, that's effectively the easiest way of thinking about it, because there's a lot of debate, is that it will initially potentially replace helicopters for some of the jobs, but at a far cheaper run rate than a helicopter. I don't want to go there. I want to go to the data collection, the last mile mid delivery, and basically focus in on small drones, because we can do that today, and your organizations can get those benefits today. And then top right, it's not just one thing. There's multi-rotors, there's fixed wings, look more like a plane, that sort of grey and yellow thing there. There's hybrids where they're fixed wing, but they do vertical takeoff. And then you've got tethered drones, which can be used to monitor something in place. If you need something monitored for any sustainable time, because they get the power through the tether. The large drone, and this is a little bit cheeky because I use this one to say, look, we've actually got to get on and do some of this stuff. But you can see examples of the hybrid and the helicopter-like thing, the bottom right picture. They will need full certification. They will go through the same rigorous process as helicopters and planes. The reason for having the guys there in the Arab dish dashes really was a message to say, unless we start working on, getting this done now, we will be behind other areas in the world. And Dubai have already announced, as you might guess, that they're going to run an air taxi service during this year. So, but my focus is small drones. And the message is basically faster, cheaper, safer, greener. And I'm not going to go through those on this slide here particularly, because I'm going to try to use it where we talk about some actual examples. And that's what this is. And I like the one of the Spire, basically because it gives you a very, it's quite easy to imagine, how would you inspect that for how it's actually doing in terms of repair without using a drone. You can't, it's not easy to put scaffolding up on a structure like that. So the only thing that they do is that they hang people have to climb up, hanging off that structure with ropes. And you can imagine how unsafe potentially that can be, or how much safer it could be using a drone. This is a slide that I've borrowed from SASIG. Hopefully, any of the councils on the call know who SASIG are, but they're a special interest group of the local government association, and really includes, I'm guessing, Southend and other areas like Reading and what have you. Will anyone who's got an airfield mostly are members of SASIG, that special interest group of the LGA. And this is their slide on where they think the applications are. You can see blue light, so emergency services, health and social care, traffic management, infrastructure, monitoring, buildings and infrastructure, which is really today's big savings, land use, environmental, digital mapping, data gathering and enforcement. I don't think there should be any surprises there. I think what may be a surprise is how much faster, cheaper, safer those things can be done with a drone. This is a slightly different view of things, which is, looking at data collection, delivery and transport, filming and photography as industries that local government ought to be looking to try to build in their area to add to the local economy. In my view, you should be encouraging companies who do these activities to exist locally, not only to provide services to the local government, but also to other businesses in the local area. And this is the long list of use cases. And the only reason I use this is really to get across the message of it's sort of fairly pervasive where they can be used and how they can contribute. So now I want to talk about a couple of use cases. And these are sort of 6 that we've pulled out. And again, we have we're building a fuller pack of these with a lot more data, but they're all focused on the benefits piece. If you look at the bottom half of the slightly gray boxes there, 1 million saving annually, absolute accuracy of 5 millimeters, 75% accuracy in leak detection, 10-fold increase in efficiency. cycle reduction from years to 6 months, saves 4 million annually. You know, that they've all got, and what we've been focusing on, and why it's taken us some time, is people don't always like to share the financial savings. But these are ones where we've got financial savings, even stuff where the bottom right is a confined space inspection of tanks. That's not the things that shoot in wars, that's the, you know, storage tanks. And they're inspected internally for condition. Quite often, depending on what they've had in them, they're quite dangerous because there's gases left in there. And but this was taking, you know, normally 60 days to inspect 20 tanks, and it's done in just 9 days. So, you know, that cycle time and that efficiency is really quite, you know, quite interesting if you're trying to save money and you're trying to allocate budgets that you currently spend on X and move them to Y, which I think is a challenge that most local governments certainly have today, and pretty much every organisation. I'm not going to spend any time on this. Again, 3 more uses in terms of looking at land development, looking at thermal surveys to drive efficiency. Anywhere you can see yellow on a picture like that says that's not very thermally efficient. There's work going on. I was talking to a company the other day. They're doing 1 million homes in 10 weeks with a thermal inspection, so that they can get highlights going of where they need to spend resource to actually make the biggest savings. And then last but not least, validating either insurance claims or when you've commissioned repairs that they've actually been done satisfactorily. So now we're going to go into a couple of, you know, sort of projects that were done. This first one was a church. You can see the picture of the church there. You can see the different roof levels and what have you. And you can tell that it's not an easy roof to, you know, to get up and inspect in one go. And the Yorkshire Housing had been told that it would cost 350 grand. It needed a complete roof replacement. There was a couple of hours flying involved with the senior surveyor looking at and he could have been in his office. He was actually on site because it was the first one they'd done. But he was looking at the screen, and once they got the data, they worked out that they only needed a 50 to 60 grand repair, not a complete roof replacement. So again, significant. This was Nottingham. They'd had a continued issues with complaints and putting expensive scaffolding up to go and inspect. And then basically the drone inspection allowed them to focus in on some of the problems that were causing the issues and actually get them repaired. And again, another social housing one, particularly these savings for high-rise inspections. This is a 70% saving for doing 1,300 high-rise properties. And, you know, it also worked out, you see in down at the bottom, 5% of the base required attention to the roof, which meant that it could be preventative maintenance before, you know, it caused a problem. And that's sort of where, you know, that's going to be cheaper in the long run. The point I'd make on this, and David can cover it if people have got questions, is it doesn't require an upfront investment. You can buy a service, get this work done without having, you know, spent a fortune on doing it. So you can start making the savings before you've got the any outlay. And you know, the reality is that will reduce. I think social housing's annual budget for repairs and maintenance is over 6 billion. So savings on the high-rise element, and if the average savings are only, you know, 10%, which is lower than any of the estimates, it's still very significant. So the next piece here, this was actually from one of the people that we talked to, they do 1,000 tower inspections a month worldwide, and this was one of their slides. And the reality is that what people do is this sort of, you see the climbing is here, bottom left. It's sort of PPE, protect the worker, you know, give him a hard hat and make sure he's got ropes on, etc., etc. And what we're advocating is get higher up the stack and substitute the worker working at height, and you know, use drones to do it. The data will be better because it's more repeatable. And as David may mention, you can compare, you know, 6 months ago with now, and get that timeline. Have things, you know, have things got worse in the time since the last inspection? And then the next piece, again, I'm not going to go through this slide, but it's really saying that you've got to look at how you control, and health and safety executive are fairly clear. If you're going to avoid working at height, please do it. And there's another slide on it which sort of puts the bullet points. Do as much as possible from the ground. That basically is drones. And you know, it's worth considering, because I firmly believe that at some point in the future, if you haven't considered alternatives to putting a worker at height, then you will be potentially in trouble if there's an accident. So I'm now going to talk briefly about the future. Happy to take questions on any of those pieces, and as I said, David will cover it again. But the future use, and this is now talking about, we formed the Future of Flight Industry Group. I think I got the invitation in the back end of 2022. First meeting, because if you remember back, there were a few government sort of things changing at the time, so we kept misplacing the current aviation minister, and he or she was meant to chair the group, and we had the first meeting in March, about a year ago, 8th of March, of the Future of Flight Industry Group. So I just wanted to sort of give you a bit of background on that, because I think it's important that you understand that government's view, basically. So who will gain? Well, pretty much everybody. I don't want to spend too much time on that. If you're not included on that, please drop a note in the chat, because we'd have to see what sort of organization you are and work out how we can help. But the Future of Flight Industry Group brings together senior figures from government, the regulator, and industry. And that's, I don't know why, that's a picture. That's probably the first meeting with Baroness Veer chairing it. I'm probably the bald head on the left-hand side of the picture there, but they probably got my good side, some would argue. And it's co-chaired by Duncan Walker from Skyports and the aviation minister. It's looking at how do we have a sustainable, beyond visual line of sight, drone operations and piloted eVTOL. How do we look at the social benefits to consumers, communities, and the general public? How do we make sure that we've got a thriving industry and we're world leading in various aspects of that? And that covers everything from, building drones, building solutions, delivering solutions, education. How do we equip the workforce to transition to some of these roles and become a world leader in the ones that we can? We're not starting completely from scratch. There's a project called Future Flight Challenge that has been running for the past few years, funded by Innovate and UKRI. And I just want to, again, pick up some the top left there is about the world's biggest automated drone superhighway. So that's looking at creating a safe zone for drones to fly between Reading, Oxford, and Coventry. And the 3 local governments are involved in that project and looking at it. Below that, the Coventry piece there, that round thing is actually a drone port. What's interesting is that the darker circle on the top could take one of those big air taxis. they need to be approved, but I think that's the Hyundai one that's sat there. So there's some big companies building those. But that physical urban airport was about 150 yards from the central train station, and was sort of behind the car park of Burger King. So there's lots of info there that there's the NHS deliveries, which is the top right, and again, happy to talk to anybody about what's been going on. So a couple of intros from before we got onto the action plan. Government was looking at a sort of fairly complicated diagram there, but really saying, it's been driven through what are the benefits to UK citizens, how do we measure the environmental benefits, and how do we measure the economic growth and jobs. And I haven't mentioned technology. They didn't mention tech. Technology is a part of the solution. It's not the solution. The solutions are how do we appeal to people there. And then just quickly, again, we can give you the link to this. This is the action plan signed by the current Minister of Aviation, Anthony Brown, and Duncan Walker. And I'm not going to go through any of that detail. There's another slide really talking about, it's got two focuses, small drones and bigger drones. The next one talks about, you'll see bottom left, local government association, ARPAS is on there, NATS is on there, that's the air traffic control organisation, Logistics UK, which is the Association for Logistics Organisations. The document covers the, why do we need a plan? And again, I'm not going to go through that in any detail. So next one, please. And it also covers some use cases. So on the left, there's the emergency services. On the right is NHS delivering stuff either to remote locations or speeding up places that have got a lot of congestion. And then you've got regional air mobility, moving people between locations safely and accurately and efficiently. That's the one that we're sort of focused on, because we can do all of that today, and it makes massive savings and safety improvements. And then connecting Scotland's Highlands and Islands is sort of the other example, because clearly there are there's physical barriers between getting stuff around there. So that's all I wanted to say. I'm now going to pass over to David Holmes from InView Assets, and he's going to sort of touch on a few things, and then hopefully we'll have a few minutes at the end for any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Graham. Hope you can all hear me. We haven't really done any sound checks or anything. I'm assuming it's all working on my hotspotting off my phone in the corner of this room from the airport. What I wanted to talk to you was from a kind of different perspective from me. We're a digital data capture company, and we happen to use drones as part of our toolkit, a bit like a screwdriver or a spanner, in order to do the job for clients. And really, we've been sort of pushing at the area, particularly around social housing, and I think large infrastructure through universities to try and work with them to see use cases for drones. So can I have the next slide, please? And one of the things that we've realized, particularly within the public sector, is the recent outcome from the Hackett report, the Building Safety Case Act 2023, of which I have to say I'm not an expert in, but we are talking to a lot of people now who use the language which we're beginning to become familiar with around things like single source of truth. So what they're after is putting together a lot of disparate information that they have around their assets, particularly, might be to do with insides and outsides of buildings, but thinking carefully about how they can collate and share that information in a visual digital format. And what Graham's been talking about in terms of the capture of drones, we think this is an exceptionally efficient way of doing that. So we would talk to clients around productivity increasing, because you're using basically evidence-based processes to be able to do that. We think to clients and we talk about the importance of data ownership once we've captured data for them. We specifically talk around that building safety case and the golden thread, and I'll talk about that in a minute or two. And then, of course, there are considerable social and environmental benefits, and again, Graham has touched on those. But I think what's key here is that last bullet point, is that our data, and we also capture data internally as well using different technologies, but our data becomes this single source of truth where the accountable person can refer back to the evidence that we may be providing on a cloud-based platform, which we outsource, in order to understand more about their asset. And again, it comes back to what Graham's talking about, that those savings in terms of understanding and better and more effective management. Okay, can I have the next slide, please? Now, I did mention, and again, this isn't my specialist area. I used to be a geography teacher, so apologies, but I did mention the golden thread of building information, which I hope that many people on this call today are probably living and breathing around that. But from what I can really glean from that, what is key about this is having the right type of data in an accessible format. So it's readily available, it's available 24/7, it becomes this single source of truth, and it's on demand, and critically, it's easily used by non-specialists. Now, if you'll just allow me, and I know we hadn't rehearsed this earlier, but I just wanted to show you something on a screen share, which might illustrate this quickly, if that's okay with the rest of the folks doing this. So I've only got one laptop in front of me. I hope this will work. We're partnered with a company called TrendSpec, who are an Australian company. We do the data capture for the client, and this is actually a place down in Plymouth. So it's Woodland Court. It's a high-rise building. We've created a 3D model of that building, and this becomes the single source of truth of that building at a particular point in time. So the client has this, and then they can click individual parts of the building because it exists in 3 dimensions externally, and they can see all the photos that we've taken as a drone company, which come up on different elevations or on the top of the building. So it becomes this, as I said, this single source of truth. Sorry, Graham, can you not see it? You're on mute.
I was muted. Apologies. Someone had to do it. I can't see any screen share, so I think in the interest of time, go to the slides.
Okay.
We can always follow up.
Yeah. Okay. I apologize. It's probably because it's not very the internet. The next slide, please, if that's all right. So the next handful of slides I've got are just illustrations of examples, and again, I think it points to what Graham's been talking about in terms of evidence saving. We think the sort of sweet spot for a lot of this drone technology is particularly around high-rise buildings, especially in terms of particularly the conversation around, I suppose, proactive rather than reactive maintenance. Graham has made a very clear point that, in fact, often you don't really know the condition of different parts of your building if they're a high rise, because of inaccessibility and because of the cost of essentially getting access to it, whether that's abseiling or putting scaffolding up. So we think that that sort of conversation around proactive maintenance, but which is very targeted, is very, very important. And indeed, we're a RICS technical partner, and they've written quite a lot about that. And there are a couple of examples here that again are in the public domain. One of them is Southampton City Housing, and again, this sort of figure of quite large returns on investment because they're able to target the maintenance. And you can see that example there. Again, it's a high-rise building. So can I have the next slide, please? So we also know, and this is just, this is what Graham has been talking about, number 3, but we also know that there's lots of other councils who are, I suppose, working in different ways to utilize these this technology. So Lewisham Council, again, are quoting a kind of round about £1 million saving in terms of undertaking remote asset portfolio. And I think what I'm trying to do is really back up what Graham has been saying, is that the numbers are sometimes quite opaque around savings, because I think it depends on what metrics you might use to calculate initial costs. But what is, in my book, and I think Graham would reiterate this, what is undeniable is the fact that this data points towards quite significant savings. And those savings cut across all sorts of different elements, not only just in terms of cost, but efficiency. And there are lots of other benefits which spin off in terms of sustainability and just working more smartly as well. Okay, can I have the next slide, please? So let's just give you, and I've got 2 or 3 slides on this, which is very quick, but a couple of examples of some specifics in our experience of working with Plymouth community homes down here in the southwest. So I'm based in Somerset. And we've had quite a long ongoing conversation with this particular social housing provider. It started, I don't know, probably about 2 years ago, where they said, typically, can you go and take some photos? You know, can you go and take some pictures of this roof, because we can't get access to it? And what we tried to sort of explain to them is, yeah, we'll do that, but we'll give you a bit of added value. We will actually do you a 3D model of the top of that building as well, because we think that's much better than simply having the pictures, which can be quite difficult if you get a big Dropbox full of pictures to know where they are on your particular roof. So we began to convince them that actually the drone technology is one of the key mechanisms that they can get out of their reactive maintenance cycle. And they can go into a much more longer term maintenance cycle, because they understand more about their asset and have got this single source of truth. So we might go out for them, and even with a small drone, kind of capture quite quickly, it might only take us an hour, a kind of digital twin of a piece of roof that they want to use, I don't know, for a piece of contract work, for instance. So it becomes a better decision-making tool. We just have an example on the screen here. This is a piece of roof right in the city centre of Plymouth. We flew a very small drone doing it. Took about, as I said, took about an hour. But what we were able to produce is some 2D CAD for them based on that building, and a 3D model, and what's called an ortho, which is a scaled top-down picture. All of that was presented to potential roofing contractors who were probably going to have to spend of the order of, I think it was 50 or 60,000 sorting out this roof. So they were able to get better quotes because the contractors essentially had a better source of evidence to be able to do this. And of course, the great benefit is those contractors or those suppliers who were quoting on this job never had to visit the roof themselves. They did it all remotely. So we think that's a much smarter way of doing this. And our cost to do that capture is a very small cost in the total amount of the repair. Okay, so it's a fraction really of the repair cost. Okay, can I have the next slide, please? So you've already seen, so you haven't seen this because I couldn't screen share it with you, but I tried to show it with you. This is a place called Woodlands Court, which is in Plymouth. They've got several of these high-rise buildings. Again, 1950s, not a lot known about them except the fact that they are always in repair. So they don't have really particularly detailed plans or overview of them. There's several things that are quite challenging about the maintenance of that, in terms of things like it's got a flat roof. So we have a flat roof deflection tool that we can deploy so that clients can see where you're likely to get pooling and standing of water. So you don't need to send anyone out on the roof to be able to do that. We can capture that very easily. So that's a reduction in your safety and improving your risk mitigation. But we might also typically as well combine a survey of the elevations using a kind of ground-based technique as well as drones with something like a thermal camera. And again, that gives another source of truth for things like cracked render. So once you have your high precision reality twin, plus you have your thermal camera, you can bring the two together and you can say, we are definitely, the render here is defective. I can target that particular place. Again, no scaffolding involved in this. So increasing speed in giving you more evidence. Okay, can I have the next slide, please? Okay, great. I didn't know how many I had. I've finished now, I think, which is great. I mean, just to say this from the sort of horse's mouth, and as I said to you, I've got a team on site at the moment at Bristol Airport, and we're flying the Apron. I think a few years ago, this would have been absolutely unheard of. I mean, ironically, the airport here has got drone anti-terrorism measures and things like that here. But they have seen the fact that they need to have data about the apron. The apron at an airport is just where they park the planes. They're doing a repainting job, and we can capture the data of the apron, which is about 20 hectares. So that's 20,000 square meters. We can do it in 2 days, and we can also produce a high-level survey of it as well, a kind of topo survey of it. And for the guys at the airport, this is all about the money, because when we are out there surveying, they have to park the planes in other places. So the fact that we can do it quicker, safer, cheaper than any other technique means it's a real sort of winner in that perspective. So I think there are lots of applications for drones which go beyond just taking pictures of buildings and things. They are a very, very valuable tool in terms of collecting evidence for all sorts of use cases. I'll stop there, Graham, if that's all right.
Yeah, thanks, David. We're sort of at the end of the time allowed. I see we haven't had any questions, I don't think, Andy. If you've got anything you want to ask and cover, I'll repeat that we will have useful information links, one to the to ARPAS and some of the webinars and CPD sessions we've got, and some other useful data for people to look at, which YPO will send out and make available. I'm happy to share the slides if anybody wants a copy of those, whilst we don't want to burden your inboxes. Hopefully it's given you a taste for what's available and the benefits available if you actually just start, and you won't get the benefits unless you start. So, you know, my plea is start looking at ways you can save money so you can reallocate whilst you're also getting on with proactive maintenance. Any comments from you, Andy?
Well, brilliant. David, thank you. I wasn't expecting such an amazing amount of detail there. I know from our perspective at YPO, we work quite closely with many housing associations. And I think they'd find that information that you've just shared absolutely fascinating. And anyone who watches this who may be from a housing association is looking to sort of act on it from a procurement perspective, looking to see how you might access suppliers like David, please get in touch. We'd love to chat. Always really,
yeah,
really,
and I'm sure, Andy,
Graham.
Excuse me just for interrupting there, that I mean, I'm sure, you know, David won't mind me saying that we've got members who do similar activities all across the UK. You know, and it used to be 6 years ago, people would travel 500 miles to do a job. That's, you know, you can't, with the cost of fuel and the cost of time these days, you can't do that. But, you know, so services are available. And as I said, that avoids and I would advocate, do not think about going out and building your own team and training your own team in the short term. Get the benefits and the savings under your belt first, and make sure that it's done with a competent operator, which ARPAS can help you with.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. There's such a capable market out there, able to support a huge agenda. So that's it, really. I don't think there's any questions. No. Oh, hang on. Someone's asked a question. I can see a real opportunity for housing to look at using drones to meet their net zero targets.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And remember that drones can be fitted with different payloads to do different things. They don't just take photographs. They can do, you know, thermal imaging very, very easily. And it can often be done at the same time by the same operator. So you kind of get double bubble benefit from that, really, in terms of a capture.
Yeah,
David,
absolutely.
David, are you seeing the housing associations coming to you more than perhaps local authorities? Are you seeing that?
I think it's a mixture. I think we try and work with housing associations who have a mindset that they want to be out of this reactive maintenance cycle, if I'm being honest. Because you know, if you're going to sweat the asset and not actually do something about decay on it or problems with it, that's not really our use space. we want to target where we can see, or where, you know, we can take photography or whatever it is of defects, and then we help them understand what the you know, what the action might be taken to deal with that, really. So yeah, I mean, we work across, Andy, a lot of universities are doing the same thing, and they're basically beginning to digitize all of their estates, and it's the same process, and drones are part of that process to be able to do that.
Yeah. And I'd say I think across the UK, more housing associations are probably engaged with drones than local authorities for own use. And part of the message is, you know, local authorities who have any building or other assets, bridges, anything else that they're meant to look at, you know, that's under their control, then condition of assets is absolutely fundamental, and the techniques and the software available is dramatically different to even what it was 2 years ago. Dramatically.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we help across the entire building life cycle, so essentially from acquisition to maintenance to disposal, and yeah, drones play a part of that.
And I think the other message there is, one of the things that often comes up is that the local IT infrastructure isn't conducive to something, you know, because this is quite large data, quite detailed data, and using some of the software apps, that data can be stored separately, so it doesn't need to integrate with the existing infrastructure, which sometimes takes a big headache off the, you know, because it can be indexed and you can look it up in you know, the condition of the building. You can look it up fairly simply, and it's also useful when you're trying to answer you know, anybody who's phoning in to say, hey, I've got this problem at my property, as to when it was last surveyed, and you know, what data have you got on it. So there are so many aspects to this. I just, my frustration is trying to get the attention of people to actually have a look at, you know, can this help, and how can they realize some of the safety and the environmental, and as importantly the business cost savings. So I'll keep quiet now, Andy.
Just one more question, David. Are you finding then that when you're approached by customers, you try and encourage that long-term relationship with them, that perhaps that longer contract where you can go through a, you know, a cycle, so it's not just short-term kind of, we want to use you this year and we might contact you next year kind of approach? So it's much more proactive.
I mean, we're very much a B2B organisation. We're not a single drone operator. We're in the drone space, we are relatively large, and that gives us the capability to be able to, I suppose, deploy on relatively large projects, but also critically to build a trusting relationship with the client, and so that we are able to say, you know, we'll work with you long term to actually understand how best we can put this technology to use in your particular circumstance. So it's part of this is being really very honest with the client about deliverables and matching and managing expectations, and making sure that they see there is lots of potential for it in terms, as you kind of prompted, Andy, being able to almost look back historically in time at some of their assets to see what, you know, what was the condition of this. I mean, for instance, just a very quick, and I promise not to take too long, but a very quick use case for this at Reading University is, I know, is that if they have work done on high roofs which are inaccessible and can't be seen from the ground, let's say replacement slates or tiles, we've got a contract with them to refly every year. They can check in our next annualized flight that the work that they've paid for, which they can't see from the ground, has been correctly done. So it's a source of truth to check that work that's been contracted and paid for, which is not easily visible, has actually been undertaken, and that's another use case for that in those sort of 3D models as well.
Huge benefits for everyone.
I'm stopping now, Andy.
Brilliant. Well, I think we've reached the end. Thank you so much. Really, really impressive amount of information there. We'll aim to put this webinar on our website at YPO. I'm sure, Graham, if we can share it back with you, you can pop it somewhere as well. And we'll make sure that appropriate links are available to anyone else. If anyone wants to chat to me about procurement routes, various other things, should they want to, then my details will also be available. Thank you very much, everyone. Goodbye.
Cheers.